Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Preface. So this happened back in 2007. I think it's been a long time. In my comment history, a local Redditor posted in r/Ottawa talking about hit and run and asked for stories of people having it all worked out. Posting my story brought back some euphoric feelings of vindication and justice being served. I feel like I should share a more elaborate version of what happened. So this happened in Ottawa at Bruce Pit, an off-leash dog park located in the West End. The wife, girlfriend at the time, we got married in 2009, we lived close. Well, close enough to this park, and brought our pupper there often. The parking lot is just a gravel uneven mess that has no lines or direction to park, but people follow some sense of normalcy on parking. The cast. Wife, Sparky, not really in the story but that was his name. Crown prosecutor, I'm in Canada, police officer, hit and run offender, witness, and ex-copper. We have a few of these, not sure if it's ex-copper or not, that represented the hit-and-run offender, but it's one of those. So not an attack on ex-copper or any of those businesses. They are legitimate and do a good job. The story. So we parked at Bruce Pit just like any other time. Nothing abnormal about it. My wife and I went on with our long walk and playtime for Sparky. When we were leaving, we were heading back to the car. I was putting Sparky into the back seat and had seen a piece of paper on my window. I thought it was just advertising. My wife picked it up and gasped, saying, "Someone hit the car. 2006 Kia Sportage at the time." I replied with, "Huh? What?" and proceeded to check. The front driver's side bumper was all scraped up from side to front. Lights and bumper were scraped. I read the note which said, "Saw someone hit your car. Call me if you need to." And then they laid out their number. I'm like, whoa, someone witnessed what happened? That's nice. Busy place after all. At this point, I called the police non-emergency line. My wife and I were waiting for the police officer to arrive, looking at the entrance when one walked right up to us. Turns out the police officer was walking her dog with her partner on break. And that's when I noticed the officer's car in the back of the parking area. I explained what happened. The officer took my information and my wife's. She then stepped away and went to call a witness. She came back and said she has more investigating to do and to talk with a witness more, but she'll get back to us at home. No problem. My wife and I head out. We drive to get gas and there is a local charity washing cars, so we had them wash ours, skipping the damaged part. Got home, took pictures, called insurance and so on. Hours later, the police officer shows up and gives us a copy of the report and tells us that the hit-and-run offender got a ticket for failure to report an accident, $200 fine. We were like, cool, all's good. My insurance fixed the car, parts and labor total to about $1,300. I didn't pay anything, so not out of pocket for anything, all's good. I am off on the timeline of events, but I remember a few months later getting a call from the Crown prosecutor, asking more details of everything that happened and telling me I'll be getting a summons to appear, as the hit-and-run offender was contesting the ticket. Rightfully so, a failure to report accident looks bad, very bad for insurance, and they could skyrocket their premiums or even outright cancel them. In any case, a week or two later, I get a summons to appear in a couple of months. The day arrives, I head to court with my wife. We get into the courtroom and they have other tickets being contested that day, speeding, parking, and so on. In the courtroom is a Crown prosecutor, police officer, witness, ex-copper, and other randoms that are on the schedule that day. I brought my invoice with me and gave it to the prosecutor. They run through the other people quickly. Basically, it's them just saying, not guilty, and since the ticket issuing officer is not present, they get off. Funny side story, one guy pleads guilty with reason. The judge says, "Are you sure?" It goes back and forth 2 or 3 times, to which the prosecutor just informs them to plead not guilty. They do and they get off. Funny to see that. On to our case. That's when I learned and saw who the witness was, and that hit-and-run offender didn't show up. but the representative did. The police officer and I are witnesses and asked to wait outside the courtroom to be called upon. Witness goes first. My wife is in the gallery listening, and I'm outside and thank the officer again for her work in this case and whatnot. Several minutes go by and I get called in. I step in, take the oath, and sit down. I've never been a witness or been in court really as a plaintiff or defendant, so it was all new to me. The prosecutor asks me a bunch of questions relating to everything and brings up the invoice that I supplied to her. The ex-copper takes offense to the invoice being entered last minute. They go back and forth and argue its admissibility, and the Crown prosecutor wins that part. Can't go into details about that. I'm an IT guy, legal jargon is very limited. So she asks about it and confirms the amount for repair, which was $1,300. The ex-copper's turn, he brings out the invoice and asks how much it says for parts. I say $400. Again, I don't remember exactly, but I remember it was well under the $750 limit for the ticket. I'll explain that later. He's done questioning me. Prosecutor takes another turn and reiterates how much the total was. And that's it. A very limited testimony on my part. Really not much other than I called the police to report the accident and then got my car repaired and so on. The officer is next, and it gets interesting here. So the officer testifies pretty much to what's going on so far, but goes on to say, after speaking to the witness, she got the van's license plate and headed to their place of residence. She informed the officer that the offender hit my car, swiping the entire side of her van. My car moved a few inches as a result, got out of her van, assessed the damage, got back in her van, and left. The officer went to the offender's house and knocked on a door. The offender answered the door and said, "Oh, I know why you're here." The officer asked to see the vehicle, to which the offender says her husband is out with it at the moment, but she'll be back shortly. Moments later, the husband arrives with dramatic dum-dum-dum sound here. A van, same make, model, and year. The police officer asks where his van is, as the license plates are different. He says it's at a friend's house. He leaves to fetch his van. Arrives shortly after with his van. Big scratch from the right front wheel, well to the back. The officer saw red paint transfer. My car was red, and documented the incident further. At this point, issued the failure to report an accident ticket. Ex-copper's turn to ask questions and asks, how did you not know the offender wouldn't be calling the police to report the accident when she got home? The great answer was, she had about 1 hour and 30 minutes to call from the time I called in to report the accident to when the officer showed up to the offender's door. All sorts of stuff to try and his client off right. I don't fault the ex-copper at all. This is his job. That's it to his testimony really. Now on to closing remarks and statements. The prosecutor goes first and points out the damage, the testimony, and so on. Normal stuff. Ex-copper's turn. He tries to dismiss based on a ticket's address. While there is no physical number, the address was listed as Bruce Pitt on Cedar View Road on the ticket. Ex-copper argues it was 175 Cedar View, and the judge says, "Okay, let's make an amendment to the ticket to show the proper address." Prosecutor, okay with that? The prosecutor answers, yes, so didn't get the ticket dismissed on that. Ex-copper then iterates the charge of failure to report an accident is for damage in excess of $750. The judge squashes that and says overall the damage is $1,300, and that's just the other vehicle, not even her own, which is likely more. He argues and it goes back and forth trying to claim all sorts of things. The ex-copper tries all sorts of things, but the judge is having none of it. Judgment time. The judge has heard it all and decides the charge will remain, and in fact, increase the amount of the fine to maximum, $500. The ex-copper pleads with the judge to lower the fine as the offender's insurance will definitely be a bigger hit. Judge replies with, "And I will not forget this last part, the offender's relationship with her insurance is personal. What they decide to do with the outcome of this charge is a personal matter, and not for this court." And that's it. A $200 fine increased to $500. Could have been much worse for the offender, as I think they were working to deceive the officer, but the officer showed up before they could effectively finish the cover-up. I really wish I knew if and how much the offender's insurance went up. A friend had lesser charges, unrelated to a hit and run, a few years ago, and his insurance just bounced him completely, and he has to be on high-risk insurance now, paying almost 4 times as much. The feeling of winning at the end and being vindicated with the judge increasing the fine to the max was euphoric. Rewriting this the other day in a comment brought back those feelings, and writing this now brings it back too. Justice was served for me that day, and it feels great even to this day, 13 years later. I certainly hope you enjoyed the story, and I did try to remember it the best I could. The ex-copper's arguments at the end may have happened while I was testifying as well. It's just been so long, I don't remember all the intricate details. If this doesn't fit here, please direct me to a more appropriate subreddit. Some context. I was 11 when this happened, and my mom was about 8-ish months pregnant with my little brother. Her live-in boyfriend was a massive waste of DNA and usually took his frustration out on me, but he thought I was at Mima's, my grandmother, because my mom's dietary changes while being pregnant were causing me health problems. I was over helping her with housework and had been playing games for about an hour at the time of the incident. So this a-hole had gotten home at about 8 or 9 p.m. and he was already in a bad mood for some reason. My mom was going to see what was going on and asked him to stop shouting because last time the neighbors came over due to the noise volume and she didn't want to have to explain that one again. Honestly, I don't blame her. She's pregnant. Her feet hurt and she was in the hospital for kidney stones like 3 days before this happened, so she's tired and frustrated. Apparently this a-hole decided he felt the need to be mad at her and started shouting obscenities at my mother, which led to me grabbing the baseball bat I kept under my bed and sneaking closer to here. Well, right as I got within range, I saw his hand fly up, and I had seen that jester before. He was aiming to hit my pregnant mother, so my first reaction was to swing that bat into his leg as hard as I could, and when he went down I hit him maybe 3 or 4 more times, at full force mind you. And even though I was a child, I was certainly not weak and knew to aim for his knees and wrist apparently. I nailed his left wrist at one point. My mother called Mima in 911, which resulted in a cop car and an ambulance. The cops asked what happened as they loaded the man into the ambulance, and he tried to say I assaulted him unprompted. This was when Mima came to the rescue and interjected that 1. I have never hit someone without being hit first, and 2. This a-hole and my mom were constantly fighting. She then said they could ask the neighbors, who verified the statement. When the cops then asked why I hit him so hard it broke at least one knee for sure, I stated he could hit me and I'll probably hide since he's bigger than me. But he was going to hit my mom and she has a baby nearby. I didn't want the baby to get hurt, so I hurt him first and made sure he wouldn't do it again. My mom agreed to press charges for assault, child endangerment, and child abuse. The cops were also informed of how he verbally, mentally, and emotionally abused me, and Mima had at least one voice recording of this happening in the past. Now, I didn't go to the court cases because I was a child and everyone agreed to not bring in the children if it was avoidable, which it was since Mima had physical proof of his abuse. But later I found out he was only allowed weekend visitation at my mom's convenience and had to pay child support. A few years afterwards, he got himself arrested for some reason and had his visitation rights revoked by the court. So yeah, don't attack my mom and don't screw with my little brother. My family will ruin you. Nothing was more gratifying than knowing that this man can no longer see his only child because he thought he could get away with being an abusive jerk. Back in 2018, I lived in a quiet neighborhood with my dog. I loved my dog so much. He was just a year old and was full of joy. Then a month later, a family of 7 moves in, and after they move in, I go and greet them. I knocked on the door and I was greeted with, "What do you want?" from our Karen of the story. "I came to welcome you into the neighborhood." I then handed her a gift basket. She took the basket and slammed the door shut in my face. I went back to my house and knowing that she would do something like that. In my house, we have a big front yard that we don't really use. I come home from work to see Karen and her 6 kids running in the front yard. One was a four-wheeler kicking up mud and tearing the grass. I went over to her and told her that this is my lot and to get her kids off of it because I was planning to sell the house and I didn't want it to look like a pig pen. She tells me that this was her lot and that her kids can play on it. I told her no, this is my property and I got the paperwork to prove it. She scoffs and goes inside while I think he's a 7-year-old is riding a four-wheeler with 5 other kids running around. I say screw it and I just let them play. The next day, my lot is filled with tire tracks and lots of trash. So I pick up the trash and build a fence that separates her lot from mine. Also, my dog now has more space to run around. After Karen sees the fence, she begins shouting at me and screaming to take down this fence right now before she calls the cops. I tell her, lady, I told you this is my property, not yours. She goes back inside and calls the cops. The cops come and look at my papers to show that I bought this land a year after I bought the house, but Karen says, I'm friends with the landlord. He says this is all my property. The cops tells her that this is my property and if she sets her foot on it again, she will be arrested for trespassing. She goes inside and stays there for a while. It's the next day and I let my dog out to do his business while I make breakfast when all of a sudden I hear my dog whimpering and Karen and her kids yelling. I immediately go outside to see what's happening. I literally see rocks being thrown over the fence at my dog while he's trying to hide. I tell Karen and her kids what the heck and to leave my dog alone. And she just goes on and picks up one of her kids over the fence to start hitting me while the rocks are trying to be thrown at my window because I put my dog inside. I pick the kid up and put him back to his mom and call the police. The police come and I tell them about them throwing rocks at my dog to the kid hitting me. The police hears from her as well, but it's clear that she was guilty. She was then charged with animal abuse. The kids went to their dads overseas and I never heard from them again. I ended up moving to a different town and ended up selling the house as well. This is a hit-and-run story. Just had some fun this morning after the gym. Came out to my car with a note on it. Someone had witnessed the hit-and-run. The idiot driver provided their manager at Domino's as contact and the manager at Sobeys had more information for me. After a little back and forth, I've now driven a block over to Domino's, taking pictures of both vehicles and have a name of the idiot driver. He hit the front passenger corner trying to park beside me and was interested in settling privately until I told him it's a $2,000 bumper. Now all of a sudden I'm scamming them, and the idiot driver denies hitting the front bumper. The driver refuses to speak English with me and the manager refuses to give me the driver's license information for a hit and run. After about 5 minutes of this, the manager threatened to call 911 and get the police involved. Sure, I'll wait right here for them. Cue malicious compliance. 35 minutes later, he's called them 3 more times before they showed up, or at least called someone. Either way, the police officers that respond are clearly annoyed when they get there. Talked with the officer, showed him the letter on my windshield and the second note with the name and plate number of the idiot driver. Took my information down and returned to me in a minute with the idiot driver's information, through his partner talking with the idiot's manager. Both officers were very vocal about the force he had to hit with to crack my bumper and transfer pain to his. The officer that I dealt with then tore a strip of the Domino's manager for calling the police over this. In the end, I got the name and license of the idiot driver an hour after I showed up looking for it. The idiot got a ticket for leaving the scene and the manager got berated for calling the police over an insurance issue. He's now got 30 days to have insurance line up the bumpers or he's automatically at fault. And all because he called the police on me. Edit. The idiot driver did not leave any information. He tried to drive away and someone witnessed the whole thing. The idiot gave the Domino's manager his contact. The Sobeys manager left a note on my call when they didn't get a response to paging in Sobeys. The idiot has already been in contact with insurance. Insurance called me about an hour later to ask for my pictures. The law here is that if the vehicles are drivable and not blocking traffic, you only need to contact insurance. Used to be anything over $1,000 in damage needed to be reported to the police, but a paint scuff does that now. This happened when I was in my first year of high school, around late 2019 or so. Class ended early and I was bored with nothing to do, so I went to my previous elementary school since it only took me 5 minutes by walking to go there. I also missed the days I spent there being nostalgic and all, so I thought it would be fun. It was Saturday afternoon around 1 p.m, so most kids had already gone home, leaving only the kids with extracurricular activities at the school. Some of the teachers recognized me, so I talked to them about how I've been and all, and asked one of them if I could go inside my old classroom since it seemed to be empty. The teacher aloud kind of joked too by saying, "What, you want to be an elementary schooler again?" But reminded me that I needed to get out at 1:30 since an extracurricular activity is going to take place there. It was 1:20 p.m. when I asked. So I said okay. I went inside the class. I spent the little time I had looking around, enamored at how despite the school being renovated in 2018, some of the stuff my old class had made or left is still in the classroom. I was reminiscing too much that I forgot about the time limit. And by the time I was looking at the Japanese calendar I made back then, it was just a normal calendar but with Japanese celebration days below the dates and all. There were already 3 kids inside the class. One of them asked, "Are you a substitute teacher?" while the other 2 looked pretty scared. I turned around and walked to them with the calendar still in my hand, but before I even said anything, another kid said, "Koinobori," while pointing at the background I used for the calendar. For context, koinobori are carp-shaped winged socks that are used to celebrate Children's Day in Japan, which happens on May 5th every year. Another kid quickly realized and said, "So you are a teacher?" I was still confused, but since they pointed out the koinobori background, I said, "Oh, you're right. I'm surprised you know what koinobori is." Which one of them replied, "Of course, teacher named X taught us 2 weeks ago." And that's where it clicked for me. They were members of the Japanese club, and they thought I was another teacher since I was holding the Japanese calendar I made back when I was still a student there. I remember the Japanese club being made when I was about to graduate, so I didn't have a chance to join and didn't know much. But I know that my Japanese teacher back then was also the teacher for this club. We got along well since I was a weeb. Yes, I was that annoying weeb who would end their sentence with disso or say stuff with broken Japanese to my friends. No, I am a better weeb now. I would always ask her about the language. I figured since I still am learning Japanese regularly and I got along well with the teacher, what is the harm of entertaining these students? Honestly, even without me saying anything, the students were already telling me their names and told me about what the actual teacher taught the previous week. I learned that all 3 of them like anime as well. One even as much of a weeb as I was, unfortunately. The teacher taught hiragana the previous week, one of the 3 Japanese writing systems, so I decided to turn my laptop on and play the Detective Conan opening without sound. See here, that Detective Conan opening video had the lyrics written in hiragana at the bottom, with any kanji having hiragana letters on top of it too. So I told him to translate the hiragana to romaji, Roman letters, and they said okay, and they got to work. It went kinda well, frankly speaking. Since there were only 3 students, it wasn't difficult to control them. I would sit beside them and they will ask about a hiragana they didn't remember or didn't know of for about 15 minutes, until the teacher finally came inside the class. The actual teacher was confused. I don't think she even recognized me at the time she even walked in. So she just asked, "Wait, what?" One of the kids quickly chimed in and said, "Teacher, we've been studying with him." She looked at me for a moment until a smile formed on her face, finally recognizing me. We talked about the usual teacher-graduated student conversation topics until I explained what happened, which made her laugh for a bit. She then explained the situation to the students, which made them apologize to me for quickly assuming things and stuff. I told them it was fine, they smiled, and went back to translate the Conan opening. I stayed up for the rest of the extracurricular activity, mostly talking to the students about the newest My Hero Academia episode until all 3 of them finished translating the opening. The students were sad to know that I won't be coming again. This honestly made me really happy, but the teacher calmed them down by saying, "I am sure he will come again. He never has anything to do after all," which made them laugh. And yeah, that was the end. I don't have the teacher's contact, so I plan to visit them unannounced in early 2020. But the pandemic happened, and I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to visit them again before I graduate from high school. I'm in my second year now. The cringe weep, I'm sorry, but it has to be said, student actually gave me his line ID. But I guess he deleted his account or something, since I don't see him on my contact list anymore. He used to message me about the anime he just watched or something about the language he didn't understand, which never fails to make me smile, but yeah, I am unable to contact him nowadays, which is kinda sad. So this happened in my third year of high school. After the 5 years of high school we have in the Netherlands, when I was about 15 years old. This year would be the first year where we would take chemistry classes and I was absolutely stoked. I loved biology and science, so I figured I would love chemistry as well. The whole class was excited for our first chemistry lesson ever, as we have heard from older students that chemistry was a fun class, was a ton of fun experiments, and at first sight, the teacher seemed to be like an awesome guy. Oh boy, were we all wrong. Note, this was the first year this teacher was working at our school. Now my class had a few clowns who would make the occasional jokes. Nothing too bad. They would still pay attention and respect the teacher overall. This teacher did not buy it and would often let the whole class, although most of us had literally done nothing wrong, stay behind in class. When we would be late to our other classes and when we would point out that he had made us stay behind, he would deny ever doing such a thing when the other teachers would ask him about it, and the whole class would get in trouble. Now, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing about this teacher was that once he got slightly mad, which was extremely easy, all that had to happen was dropping a pencil. He would just stop teaching. He would just sit behind his desk, doing nonsense on his phone, I kid you not, and occasionally, if he was feeling generous, he would put on a YouTube video that would do the teaching for him. Also, whenever we did experiments and I would ask for an explanation on why something gave a certain chemical reaction, he would just laugh at me and tell me that I should have paid attention during his explanation, an explanation that hadn't even taken place. Also, he would put stuff in his tests that wasn't even in a book, saying that we should be able to understand these things by using common sense. Please, how do you use common sense when solving equations? This was 5th year material. Now, as you can imagine, everyone's grades were absolutely miserable. They were in fact so bad that I and a ton of others weren't even passing that year. And that when all of our other grades were okay, it was just the F in chemistry that didn't allow us to pass the whole year. I'm a good student who works incredibly hard to get good grades, and the prospect of me not passing the year gave me numerous panic attacks. Even more when I talked to my mentor and she said she couldn't do anything about it. I decided to take action and asked classmates to ask their parents to start sending emails to this teacher, hoping that this would wake him up. It didn't. In fact, this guy didn't even respond to any of the emails that were sent to him. I was getting more and more frustrated with this teacher. I am not someone who likes to confront people, but with the end of the school year coming closer and closer, I decided I had to take some kind of action. So I decided to confront him with his behavior. Scared as I was, I went up to this teacher after school to ask him why he was doing all of this and why he didn't respond to any of the emails, and so on. He, as always, just laughed and sent me away with a ton of sarcastic remarks. That got my blood boiling. I was so done with this guy. Pro-revenge incoming. I collected all of the emails that were sent to him from both parents and students. I recorded a few of his classes on my iPad. We were a digital school, and although I was not actually allowed to do this, I didn't care about the rules anymore at this point and just wanted to collect as much evidence as I could. These videos of course showed how much of a lousy teacher this guy was. I printed out the grades of all the students in my class and you could clearly see all the E's and F's in chemistry on everybody's grade list. The best thing happened when I decided to record another confrontation with him, when he would actually say some pretty nasty things to me. He called me a lousy witch and said my mother didn't do a good job at raising me. Of course, I was extremely angry after, but oh so happy when I knew I got that on tape. When students, out of his other classes heard about what I was doing, they were absolutely stoked and provided me with much more evidence. Videos of this guy going crazy in front of class, even more bad grades and so on. In the end, I made an incredible long Google document with all the videos and pictures included. It was over 35 pages long. It was all the evidence and statements on why this teacher was absolutely incompetent and begging for an exemption in his class. I sent it to all the important people of our school. 2 days later, I was taken out of English class by our warden, who then took me to his office and asked me for some more explanation on the matter. And I explained everything to him in person and told him that I knew my whole class would tell him the exact same story. I also asked him how come the school hadn't taken action in advance, seeing as literally everyone in the third year had a D or lower in chemistry class. He apologized and said this was in fact a horrible mistake. After this talk with the warden, he went straight to this horrible teacher's class and took him into his office. I don't know exactly what happened inside that office, but I can tell you that it was a lot messier when I and a classmate came back there after approximately 30 minutes. In the end, he was fired and everyone got an exemption in chemistry. The warden told me that he had tried to turn the tables and accuse me of lying and saying that he was lured into a trap. Sadly, a lot of people, including me, had to drop chemistry the next year due to a major disadvantage in his class. I am happy that he got fired though, and I passed a year. My first post. I read many others and felt the need to share this little historical piece from my adolescence. Firstly, the background. I have Asperger's syndrome. Long story short, I was bullied and ostracized by the kids in school starting from a young age. Neither here nor there to the story, as we will be skipping to 7th grade. At this stage, I'm 12 years old, going to a school where mostly everyone thinks I'm a worthless loser, teachers included. By this time, it's mostly low-grade stuff that I'm used to. By now, my life revolves around video games and action movies. My worthless principal decides to take on a pet project involving taking kids with behavioral issues from the behavioral school into public school to prove how he can rehabilitate delinquents. Without further ado, our story begins. This punk kid is about 15 biologically. In my country, 8th grade is usually 12 to 13. A much bigger, taller, and has an all-around harder body than me. I was underpowered at the time and had no coordination, physically or socially. Punk kid has me beat in all areas, including political power. Anytime he did things to me, constantly bullying, humiliating me in front of others, physically assaulting me and so on, the teachers, under orders from the worthless principal, would simply tell him not to be so naughty. As an example, one of his favorite activities was making me lick the wall, threatening to smash my teeth on bricks for non-compliance. The incidents grew to be daily, and the worthless principal was more offended at me for being such a juicy target that the punk kid would not be able to resist. He did not want his pet project to be ruined, couldn't care less about me. It came to a head one day when the punk kid decided to just out of the blue tackle and choke me. Out of character, as it was mostly verbal and emotional abuse with a tinge of physicality to remind me that I couldn't fight back. When I went and saw the worthless principal about it, he was mad at me for being too tempting of a target and was fed up with his multi-week long campaign of trying to cover for the punk kid. He told me, go back to class, and was highly annoyed with me. I stick around hiding in the bathroom across the hall till he talks to the punk kid about the incident. Sticking my ear to the wall to listen, I gather my intel. All I hear is a worthless principal telling the punk kid that I don't care who he is, I went out on a limb for you, and you're ruining it. Emotionally destroying someone isn't an issue, but one cannot leave marks. That type of speech. Then my golden piece of information. The worthless principal says, very sternly, if one more physical incident happens, you are out of here. The kid is now scared as he knows that this school is ultra soft and easy compared to his delinquent school. The thought of being back to a small fish in a big pond would terrify anyone with a taste of being big man on campus. I used my superior intellect to acquaint him with his fears. One aspect of being the ostracized kid with Asperger's syndrome is that I read lots. Sun Tzu was a favorite of mine the summer between grade 6 and 7. A good quote that stuck in my head: "Throw thy soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they will face death, there is nothing they may not achieve." Officers and men alike will put forth their uttermost strength. As I was on ground where there is no retreat, having no other alternatives to fight back, physical would do nothing due to the strength difference, and he was politically protected. I used a time-tested tactic of burning the fields to deny the invading enemy food and fodder. I decided to trade my pain for results. The ancient truth says, "The end justifies the means," right? This, dear readers, is where the hammer enters our lovely tale. I go home and take a ball bean hammer from the toolbox and proceed to hit myself on the hip and stomach over and over for about 3 hours. The pain, although intense, meant less than nothing to me. I smiled the entire time. The next day, I walked into the worthless principal's office. "Look what that punk kid did to me. I was walking home from school and he threw me down and kicked me like a bunch of times." Silence. The punk kid was taken back to his behavioral school before the lunch bell sounded, protesting that he never did anything. Currently, he is probably dead or in prison. I neither know nor care to know. Either way, I wish him nothing but suffering. Postscript. I have since become a double black belt in karate and judo, as well as an avid weightlifter. Anyone who physically disrespects me will be put down with extreme prejudice. I went on to be a standout in my high school wrestling team. The moral of the story is you only get out of life what you put in. Also, the dismal science of economics teaches us that there are no solutions, only trade-offs.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.